So how might Asian carp affect crappie? The first way would be through direct competition. Young crappie feed on plankton. Silver and bighead carp also feed on plankton. So as carp populations expand, they might outcompete our native crappie, causing them to starve. The potential result of this would be as carp numbers go up, young crappie numbers would go down. So here we have a graph of our age 1 white crappie, which were collected in Lake Barkley in our fall trap nets. We've been conducting fall trap netting on Lake Barkley in the same bays, the same net locations, at the same time of year, every year since 1985. So this graph gives us a lot of historical perspective from a time before we had carp, and also the current time when we have a lot of carp. And what we see is a lot of variation between years. Some years had really good spawns. For instance, we collected a lot of age 1 white crappie in 2015, which indicates a really good spawn in 2014. Other years had really low numbers, such as 2013 and 2012. These represent weak spawns. What we don't see is a significant decline as carp populations have expanded. We see a similar trend whenever we look at black crappie age 1. What we see is an increase starting in the early 90s, late 90s of black crappie, which is indicative of the environmental conditions, increases in water clarity. Prior to the 90s, there weren't very many black crappie in the lake. In more recent history, as the carp population has expanded, we still haven't seen that significant decline yet. This is further illustrated by this chart, which shows you the combined black and white crappie. Now, those age 1 fish that were collected in our trap nets, that red line is that long-term average. As you can see, there's a lot of variation there, but there's no significant trend downward yet. The second effect that Asian carp might have on crappie would be an indirect effect based on an interaction with our shad populations. Adult crappie feed on shad and other small fish. Shad, silver carp, and bighead carp all feed on plankton. So as carp populations expand, they might outcompete our native shad, causing their population to crash. With no shad to eat, adult crappie might starve. So as the Asian carp numbers go up, shad numbers go down, resulting in adult crappie health going down. So how do we measure crappie health? The way we do that is through what we call relative weight. Basically, we go out when we're conducting our trap netting. We'll collect thousands of crappie, we'll weigh them, and we'll measure them all individually. We'll put those numbers into an equation, which allows us to evaluate the relationship between their length and their weight. That equation is based on hundreds of other crappie populations. So it gives you a score for each individual fish, and that score reflects how healthy that fish is, whether it's skinny or whether it's plump and has a nice fillet on the side. A score between 95 and 105 is considered to be normal. A higher number indicates that the fish was very healthy. A lower number indicates that the fish was very skinny. What we see whenever we look historically back at the white crappie relative weights in Lake Barkley is that there's also a lot of variation. And this is largely a function of food availability as well as the density of crappie. As the crappie density goes up, relative weight tends to go down. So looking in the recent history, we don't really see any significant declines as a result of carp population expansion. And again, we see the same thing when we look at black crappie relative weights. The numbers themselves are a little bit low, but they're not abnormal. Certainly in recent years, they're higher than they were before we had carp. So we haven't seen any of those significant effects on black crappie health yet.
If you found this video to be informative, please stay tuned later this week as we share some more of our results from our Kentucky lake trap netting, as well as our Kentucky and Barkley Lake electrofishing samples for black bass.